Okay, we're almost ready to go. Frank here is going to be helping everybody. Let's have a hand for Frank. Frank's doing this whole room almost single-handed. Thank you, Frank. And I think we need a bigger room. What do you say? Yeah, that's about right. I think that we tried to get that room, and they also said that Sunday after 3 they're closed, so that means we can have like the whole thing or that whole thing, or I don't know. That's not going to work over there. Hold on for a second. We got audio here. You can also see the audio right there too. Okay. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to introduce the guys. Does everybody know these 4 people up here by any chance? Does everybody know all 4 of them? No? Okay. Well, I will introduce them then. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Bruce from Backyard Skeptics. I'm the founder of Backyard Skeptics. We have over 1,000 members now, 6 chapters. Probably one of the most active atheist groups in Orange County. We love debating. We like. Should I go over here, Mark or Jeff? How's that? You got my mug? Okay, it makes sense for the streaming audience. Did anybody stream their friends that were streaming? BackyardSkeptics.com. You can type it in, text it up, Facebook it, whatever. It's also available afterwards. So if you really enjoy it and your friends want to see it, then you're more than welcome to if you go to Backyard Skeptics, and the streaming site's one of the tabs on the main menu. You got that okay, buddy? You're working? Well, you got a few minutes anyway. So first, does everybody know where the restrooms are here? They're that away somewhere. And we will open this up again as soon as this other meeting is done. It should be done at 7. I know they're running a little bit late. We did run direct line to you, by the way, so you should be getting audio. For the atheist side, and first I'm going to introduce everybody, and then I'm going to tell you what the format's going to be. I hope you enjoy the format. First, Sean Taylor identifies himself as an agnostic regarding his absolute knowledge of the existence or non-existence of any possible gods. Sean sits on the board of directors for the Humanist Fellowship of San Diego and is an active event organizer for the non-believing community of San Diego County. Sean is a co-host of the Make a Believer Out of Me show, which I've listened to, very, very good show, with his friend Jim Ellison, where they allow believers of any type to have a go at their eternal souls. When he's not learning and debating about life, universe, and everything else, Sean has a perfect wife, and his perfect wife are kept busy by their 2 creative young boys. So let's have a hand for Sean. Right, Sean. On the other side, I'm going to jump around to Dave Lehman. A lot of you know Dave Lehman. He's a big organizer on his own. He has a BME from University of Minnesota, an MDiv from Grace Cemetery. What does DIV stand for? Divinity. Oh, I should have known that. Okay. Divinity. A D philosophic DPhil. Doctor of Philosophy from Oxford Graduate School and a PhD from LBU. He lectures on university campuses, churches, and conferences on creationists, cults, and Christian evidences. And I understand that you teach also creation to other ministers. Is that correct? You're a teacher of teachers, right? Is really what you are. Okay, let's have a hand for Dave. Good friend of mine, great West Coast swing dancer. Jumping back to atheism, we have a good friend of mine, Mark Smith, who was one of the first atheists that contacted me when I started Backyard Skeptics 7 years ago. Good friend. Is the human being with all its complexities designed by nature or supernaturality? No, that's the wrong one. Mark Smith spent 20 years as a Christian growing up in the Nazarene Church and ended up in the Church of Christ non-instrumental. He left Christianity after an intense 6-month study of the Second Coming prophecies, resulting in his discovering that Jesus had been a false prophet. Mark has written 2 unpublished books and numerous articles and essays and tracts via his website, JC Not For Me. Free handouts and public debates. He now operates as an evangelical atheist. Yahoo! He works as a mechanical engineer and as a profession, unlike the ministry, that does not tolerate fantasy or wishful thinking. A little bit of non-theistic or anti-theism in his description. Let's have a hand for Mark. And finally, Don Stoner, which has absolutely nothing. So, Don, you're going to have to introduce yourself.
I'm nobody in particular.
Don, yeah, that's right. I like that, Don. Don coordinates the Christian Scientists, or Scientific Christians, something like that, at Calvary Chapel in Long Beach, which I believe that the minister is here, the head minister is here, right? Right over there, yeah. And very interesting debate. Sometimes we go as a group and talk about it. He's very open to talking about all the different type of scientific evidences of the universe and creation and God. And finally, myself. I already talked about myself, so enough of that. So here's the format. We've been working on a couple really fun formats for debates because you know the classical debate, opening statement, rebuttal, talk, open Q&A, and finally closing statement. So we're going to move it a little bit and be a little bit more creative. What I have done is I've said you can divide your opening statement and closing statement in 30 minutes any way you wish from both speakers or one speaker. You can take 15 minutes at the beginning, 15 minutes at the end, or 30 minutes at the beginning and no closing statement. Same with the other side. So they're going to separate their closing and opening statements separately, but they will be timed for 30 minutes total, so they can kind of choose and pick whatever they want. In between, we will have a question and answer period, but it will be mixed into the conversation. So Chris here will be going around with the microphone, and we do need the microphone because we are streaming this and we need it on online clear, where you will be able to ask one question. Please make it a question. No long comments, please. And they will talk for 5 to 10 minutes on that one question of the human eye, or if it's designed by God or by nature. And we'll probably be going into the human anatomy as well. Does everybody get that? So think of a question. We're going to randomly choose whoever raises their hand first, and we're going to do that for about an hour and 20 minutes. So that will consume most of the debate. And we're ready now to start. Did you press start? Did I press start on the... It's streaming, okay. Streaming, all right. Hello, streaming audience. So I hope you enjoy it. Too bad we don't have a chat, but I'm going to work on the chat room in the future so you can chat online. And I think that they've agreed, our speakers have agreed that Mark will be doing his opening statement. So one more hand for round one for Mark.
Which microphone?
Doesn't matter. Okay. But you have to have one. Should I put some reverb on it, Scott?
Testing. Good afternoon. Good evening, people. This is a 10-minute presentation. Excuse the shadows and the screen being too small. But anyway, in the beginning, 3 chapters is all it takes to prove intelligent design false and disprove that a God wrote Genesis. In the beginning, God. That's what we are being told by the anonymous author of Genesis, who didn't eyewitness the beginning, nor even cite any sources who did. Some speculated Moses wrote the book, but if so, then Genesis was written 2,300 years too late, which goes against Christian insistence on the vital importance of eyewitness accounts, at least for other things. The question arises then, how did this anonymous author get his information? There are 2 possible ways. He heard voices in his head and wrote it down, i.e. he was schizophrenic, or as Christians call it, verbally inspired. But if the author wasn't schizophrenic, maybe he was a storyteller, enthralling his entertainment-starved tribe with clever fabrications. Either way, does the author of Genesis show godlike intelligence, or rather lapses thereof? That is the question. Are you smarter than Bible God? Thank you. Are you smarter than Bible God? You are, and that's why even a fifth grader could have done the universe better. For example, bees without stingers, California without earthquakes, flatulence without stank. If children can improve bees and farts, Bible God's really dumb or doesn't exist. Divine intelligence in Genesis? Really? Genesis 1:5. Daytime, evening, morning, and night, existing before the sun, which causes daytime, evening, morning, and night. Genesis 1:12. Fruit trees with no sun to warm the earth, thriving at absolute zero temperatures. Genesis 1:10. With no sun in the universe, liquid water at absolute zero? And if your second telling of the story contradicts your first, that's a sign you're lying. And Genesis is lying to you. So $100, here's the $100, to the first person who can show otherwise by sequencing the contradictory steps of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. This is a real offer. That $100 is available. Solve it tonight. As for Adam and Eve, kicked out and burning alive in hell for eating fruit? Really? Is that intelligent? Death penalty for apple thieves? Maybe I saw this in the news the other day. AP News, Eden, Texas. Judge Dredd, in a trial short even by Texas standards, scheduled execution for 2 apple thieves and all of their relatives. Bruce, could we? Wait, hold on, everybody. No, this is nuts. This is screwed up.
We're done.
The couple, 13-year-old first-time offenders, were not allowed an attorney, appeal, or to question the ruling. They were convicted of going to a neighbor's tree and removing an apple. Thereupon, their house was stormed by the Eden SWAT team and the suspects apprehended. Execution will take place in 900 years. The babysitter from hell. According to Genesis, Adam and Eve were created in the Garden of Eden, a wondrous playground. These babes in the woods were more naive and gullible than a 3-year-old. If told to stick their hands into a fire, they would have. Bible God placed a poisonous fruit tree in their playground with warnings about death, something they knew nothing of at this point. Of course, Bible God built a chain link fence around the tree? No. Instead, he threatened them with death, whatever that was. To guarantee they'd break his rules, he said, eat from every tree. Don't eat from every tree. Either way, they were on their way to hell. Bible God then left Satan to babysit. What could possibly go wrong? And hid just out of sight, knowing that what was about to happen. He could have stopped it at any time, but never did. The Prince of Darkness, babysitting the kids? It would be a top-billed boxing match of epic proportions. Satan, the ultimate used car salesman, versus gullible children, ignorant of lies and liars. They'd be tested on their prior knowledge of good and evil before eating the apples required to obtain said prior knowledge. Picture a calculus exam on the first day of algebra. What could possibly go wrong? What went wrong is Satan, now a snake, talking them into eating poison, while Bible God watches the whole thing and does nothing. He does nothing till he pops out of hiding to provide an antidote or a trip to the ER like normal and loving parents would have done? No. Rather, he curses and blames them for eating poison he himself had left out. The poor toddler's setup hadn't a chance. Imagine picking a babysitter from a list of known pedophiles, then watching your toddlers getting raped and doing nothing to stop it. Are you a good mother? Do you really love your children? Will neighbors think it was somehow for the good of the children? If you claim to work in mysterious ways, does that get you off the hook somehow? Decent parents wouldn't be so evil, hateful, derelict of duty as to hire Satan to babysit. If parents were to do this, curses, not praises, should be hurled in their direction. Christians, out of all the gods mentioned in the Jewish Bible, and these are just a few of them, only one has done something as low and despicable as hiring Satan to babysit, then condemned to hell the victims created by his own bad decisions. Righteous indignation demands you curse the name Jehovah, but instead, like spiritually battered wives, you meekly sing praises of what a good fellow he's been. If you must worship from all the gods to pick from, why the worst of the lot? Bestiality and Bible God. Once upon a time, the Lord God said, "It isn't good for the man to live alone. I need to make a suitable partner for him." So the Lord took some soil and made animals and birdies. He brought them to the man to see what the names he would give each of them. Then the man named the tame animals and the birds and the wild animals. That's how they got their names. None of these was the right kind of partner for the man. Surprise, surprise. So the Lord God made him fall into a deep sleep, and he took out one of the man's ribs. Then after closing the man's side, the Lord made a woman out of the rib. Fossil evidence, anyone? And brought her to the man. The end. So once upon a time, bestiality apparently was A-okay with Bible God. For immediately after declaring that Adam needs a wife, presto, he makes animals, zebras, ducks, sea slugs, and snakes. Not just that, he parades them in front of Adam one by one so he could name them and pick out a pet. No, a wife. And I'm not making this up. This is in the Bible. Several months later, the show finally ends. Nothing has piqued his sexual interest, thank goodness, and Adam was still sad and lonely. Bible God finally came up with a solution and evolved a woman from a rib. And they lived, well, you know how it ends. The young couple got evicted by their landlord. The end. Unintelligent design. Bible God said it's not good for man to be alone. But then he's the one who created the man alone in the first place. So with this statement, he just confessed to screwing up. So much for hitting the mark. Sin means to miss the mark, to swing and miss, to do less than a perfect job. Per the definition then, by admitting he did something that wasn't good, the God of the Bible is a sinner. As for that word good, it's the same good used elsewhere in this neighborhood of Genesis. It's not a different kind of good in this one verse. So strike one, not doing a good job. Bible God sinned, missed the mark a second time in putting Adam, a creature he designed to be social, into the solitary confinement of Eden. Commentator Matthew Henry wrote, God pitied Adam's solitude. Man is a social creature. Solitude would turn a paradise into a desert, a palace into a dungeon. God pitied Adam's solitude. Solitude created by his own failure to foresee and guard against it. Strike two, failure to guard against loneliness. Strike 3 was playing matchmaker, trying to set Adam up on a blind date with a cow or whatever. This Christian mingle from hell was a complete disaster that anyone other than Bible God could have seen coming. Strike 3, bestiality. Intelligent design in Genesis, before you're even 3 little chapters into this book, you have run into anonymous authorship 2,300 plus years after the fact. 5th graders who could have done it better. Abysmal ignorance of astronomy. Sunsets, morning and evening, before the sun even existed. Unhinged reaction to normal childish behaviors. Contradictory commands. Eat, don't eat. Hiring Satan as a babysitter. Christian mingle, hooking up Adam with animals, or trying to. Screw-ups, admitting the screw-ups, and then bungling the fixes to the screw-ups. 3 strikes, you're out. There is no intelligent design in Genesis. The end.
Okay, well. So we're switching projectors now. Dave or Don would like to go next. Okay, Dave would like to go next, but before you do, those people who are paying by Visa, can you give the visas to Frank? He'll do the 22 on all the visas equally. And so let's see, that's Katie, is that one? And there's anybody else? I think there were 2 others. Let's see, 1, 2. Frank, you got 3 visas coming your way, all right? And I think that one over there is for 2 people, is that right? Okay.
You want me to switch seats with you? Yeah. You sit here, I'm going to sit on the back.
Okay, Dave, you're up, and I think that we have to get the projector working. So that was about, I think, around 18 minutes, so you have 12 minutes to go at the very end. That was 10 minutes?
Guaranteed.
Okay. My clock must be fast on my phone. Are you formulating questions for the question and answer period? I hope. 22, correct. Except for the lady, I think it was 44 for that. Is that correct? You were paying for 2 people? Yes. So 44 on that one. Okay, we're still waiting for the projector to come up. Sorry for the mark for the imposition on the projector. Okay, looks like we have something here. You want to touch your mic there, Dave?
Oh, no, I'm not plugged in. I don't know what happened to it.
Okay.
Where's my cord?
Did the cord get disconnected?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions that we can kind of, yes, please. Yeah, you can. That's a good one, but we're going to wait till all those speakers. I think that Dave is going to be it. And then, oh, here we go. Okay, looks like Dave, you're it. People can read it. Doesn't have to be perfect there, Dave, unless you want it to be. Looks like that's good. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're ready. Okay, Damien, here we
Testing.
go. Ready?
Okay, this was not supposed to be the topic of the debate, but we didn't get the message to our people here, so we are changing the topic a little bit, I guess, but I'm still going to do mine, but I just wanted to respond to what he said.
Well, you can always respond later as well. You can do either one. It'll take up
Okay.
your opening statement.
Well, just take a second here.
Okay.
Basically, the idea was Moses was not an eyewitness to the accounts of Genesis. That is true. But the writing was actually done in cuneiform and joined by colophons. And we have the original writing on clay tablets in cuneiform that were carried all the way through, actually on the ark. Moses got this much information, so just what you're talking about, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, I know you think it's funny, but this is true. I mean, this is what happened, I believe, because we have the witnesses, and if you look very closely at the text, you will find that there's a first part of it, and then in 2:1 it says, and they were created, and then it starts up again, they were created, so now you don't miss up on the actual order of the tablets themselves. And then, of course, you can see that's carried right on through. So, it says 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. You go to 2:4, and you see when they were created. And then you see that statement again. So the statement is repeated so that you know where you are at in the text, and you don't mix the order. Then Moses was pretty much eyewitness to the rest of the Torah, the first 5 books. But at least that he had it written down. Now, the Israelites were very strong on oral tradition, and they had memorized the first 5 books in Hebrew if they were wanting to be a rabbi, so they had that, but they always memorized from a text. So that's what we're looking at, and so I believe that's part of it, that we have the original writings that were carried about by, first of all, Seth, and then after him, Enoch carried him, and then from Enoch to Shem, and Shem to Terah, and continues on. Anyway, that was basically the way that I think it was transferred. So it was in writing, but probably in many cases it was there was some oral tradition that went along with that. And then we have something he said about Adam and Eve in hell. I don't see anything in the Bible saying Adam and Eve went to hell. They were judged, they were kicked out of the garden, but they were not sent to hell because they ate an apple. That was just simply one of the things. They had a perfect environment, and God was testing them, and this goes through 7 dispensations. Then you've got the sun, moon, and stars created on the 4th day, and I believe the reason that God did this was he was trying to show the centrality of the earth. The earth was, as it says in Isaiah, the earth was created to be inhabited. And the sun and the moon and the stars, the sun to light the day, the moon and stars to light the night for signs and for seasons. And so they were sort of servants to the earth. Now, God is light. He doesn't need a light generator in order to create light. And of course, there's 3 ways to know whether the word day actually means 24 hours. One is if it uses the evening and the morning, or a combination of evening and morning, or it says that it uses an ordinal number, like the first day, the second day, the third day. And each one of those are used in all 6 days. So I believe that those were literal 24-hour days. And besides that, a day-night cycle, a vegetation cycle would have died out. Various other things if it was an extended period of time. Plus you need it in order to get an ecosystem. It almost has to be all together at once. You can't have, for example, flies and then pretty soon spiders being created several million years later, because the earth would have been populated by flies up to a depth of 50 feet, the entire earth, in a matter of 6 months. So I think you needed the entire ecosystem to survive. You needed plants to create the oxygen and humans to create the carbon dioxide, and so they all work together. So I think as far as his answer that goes, I think those arguments are not valid arguments in any way. Anyway, so from there I will just respond to what he was saying, and we'll talk more about it, I'm sure. Then I'd like to refer to just a little bit of yeah. Did I lose it? Okay. We'll see if we can find it again.
You have to go out. You have to go into the PowerPoint.
Okay, in the beginning. Well, I was hoping that it wouldn't do this. What's that? Yeah, we're having a little problem here.
Dave, get the Jeff, get the screen. And him.
I had this problem before.
I'm Dave Lehman. I was the one who was speaking on October 19th. We dialogue quite a bit. Remember now?
I think we're on. Okay, we'll start again.
We're trying to figure out where all of this is. Yeah, now it's coming.
I'll stand up so you can see me. What I sometimes like to talk about is just understanding, and part of the reason for having this debate at this particular topic was the fact that Steve suggested that we do this debate because there was something about the atheists were saying that the true scientists would not be creationists, and that was, they wouldn't say it in so many words, but it seemed to be implying that, and Steve thought, well, this would be a good debate to have, and so I said, Steve, do you want to be one of the debaters? And he declined that, but I think he would have done great. Anyway, the whole idea is, we talk about the elephant in the living room, I mentioned it before, is the fact that what's happening in this country, and what happened way back at the time of Darwin, was that they had the X Club, and in order to get your stuff published, it had to get through Huxley, and he happened to be the head of the committee, and he was Darwin's bulldog. So you're not going to get anything published then. We just had I talked to Don Johnson, a fellow who's written several books, got 2 PhDs, and he had a fellow who he was writing an article, and he just mentioned Dembski's name in one of the footnotes of his article, and for that reason his article was not allowed to be published. It had nothing to do with creation, but just even mentioning somebody who was a moderate creationist, that's the kind of thing we're dealing with. And that's why Jerry Bergman wrote the book Slaughter of the Dissidents, because professors all over the country, if they even mention creation in a positive way, they could lose their job, their tenure, they won't be allowed to graduate. This is what's happening. So scientists, even though they know better, just like the elephants in the living room, he says the elephant, he looks like an elephant, smells like an elephant, knocks things over, eats a ton of hay, trumpets like an elephant, yet we have to swear it isn't there. And that's design. So we have to carry on 2 insanities at once. First, it would be insane to believe that it happened naturally when you know the facts. Second, it would be insane to say that you believed it didn't happen naturally, because you'd lose your job, you'd lose your tenure, you'd lose something. And so the scientists are afraid because they're not in charge. And the question is, and of course we looked at this, the Christian founders of almost every key scientific discipline. You know, we look at Isaac Newton, Johann Kepler, Robert Boyle, Lord Kelvin, Louis Pasteur, Matthew Murray, Michael Faraday. You know, we go right through the list, and the founder of almost every scientific discipline was a creationist, was a young earth creationist and a Christian. And here's just the list of some of them, the disciplines: antiseptic surgery, Joseph Lister, where we get Listerine, bacteriology, calculus. Some of us wish that Isaac Newton hadn't been around when we were in school, but celestial mechanics, I kind of wish that Johann Kepler had done something else. But anyway, chemistry, Robert Boyle, comparative anatomy, computer science, Charles Babbage, dynamics, Isaac Newton, and electrodynamics, James Clerk Maxwell, who was more excited about some of his sermons than he was about his scientific discoveries. And we just go on and on. The list continues on and on and on. And these are the contributions that they made by Bible-believing scientists. And we go look, just, I can't list them all, we don't have time, but just get a picture of what's, the fact is. And here's just an example of 3 of them. Robert Boyle, as director of the East India Company, spent large sums of promoting the spread of Christianity in the East, contributing liberally to missionary societies and to the expenses translating the Bible or portions of it into various languages. Boyle supported the policy that the Bible should be available in the vernacular and language of the people. And we've got people like Louis Pasteur, who he believed absolute faith in God and the eternity and conviction that the power for good given to us in this world would be continued beyond it were feelings which pervaded his whole life. The virtues of the gospel had ever been present in him, full of respect for the form of religion which he had been that of his forefathers. He came simply to it naturally for spiritual help in the last weeks of his life. Johannes Kepler thought that he had revealed God's geometric plan for the universe. Much of Kepler's enthusiasm for the Copernican system stemmed from his theological convictions about the connection between the physical and spiritual. He actually had written 2 books on the Star of Bethlehem. And so he was looking for it. Unfortunately, somebody mistranslated or actually got the typeset wrong in one of Flavius Josephus's works, and he ended up with looking at the wrong day for the birth of Christ. Herod's death, actually. And so we looked through this, and I'm not going to go through a lot of this, but I just wanted to get a little bit of an idea of, and just talking about the origin of life itself. This is one thing that the evolutionist, in fact, Darwin wrote a book, Origin of the Species, in which he never bothered to address the subject even. So, where did life come from? Well, it seems to be a very difficult thing to come up with in any kind of a naturalistic explanation for how life could possibly have come about. The total probability, would be 1 over 10 to the 89,190th power, the probability of forming specific DNA times 1 over 10 to the 78,436th power, the probability of forming specific 124 proteins. And this is to get the simplest form of self-reproducing life would be 1 over 10 to the 167,626th power, assuming a million Earths around every star in the universe, and every molecule in the oceans of these Earths was an amino acid trying to form or a nucleotide trying to form a DNA, or an amino acid trying to form a protein. Forming a protein or a DNA every second for 10 billion years. Now this is, and you can understand the problem here. You can only cram 10 to the 130th power electrons in the known universe, and this is Dr. Morwitz's theoretical smallest organism. In reality, even simple bacterium is this common intestinal habitat of man and animals contains at least 3 million DNA base pairs. So anyway, despite the virtually impossible odds of proteins arising by several chance processes, there's not the remotest reason to believe they could ever form a membrane-encased, self-reproducing, self-repairing, metabolizing living cell. That's a jump in complexity that nobody's ever been able to address, and that's why Michael Behe jumped ship, because he was a cell biologist, and he realized that the cell itself was something way beyond. What happened? So anyway, here's just a little bit of a picture of the single human cell, the biochemistry of it. Inside your cell, there's a nucleus. Inside that nucleus are chromosomes. The genes are attached to chromosomes like beads on a chain. Inside the genes, DNA, each gene has 1,000 or more such DNA units within it, and inside each cell are tens of thousands of such genes grouped in 23 pairs. Inside the DNA is a total of genetic possibilities for the given species. Of course, the genotype. And then phenotype is what you actually see expressed. A genotype is all the possibilities that you have in your body. And then you've got buffers and barriers. Third, living cells contain thousands of different chemicals, some acidic, some basic, so somehow you need to get these buffers or they'd all self-destruct. Then you've got just a lot of things within the cell itself, and Don is going to deal with that. I just thought I'd show a little bit of this. You've got the messenger RNA, translating package needed from the beginning. You've got to have the specific sRNA for each individual amino acid. Yet there's yet another type of RNA known as the ribosomal RNA. Under the influence of the messenger RNA, the ribosomes are assembled into the units known as polyribosomes under the direction of the message contained in the messenger RNA. While it's in contact with the polyribosomes, the amino acid or sRNA complexes are used to form the protein. So this is what you have. You've got electrical polarity, you've got biological compiler, you know. Where are all these things coming from? The biological compiler that accomplishes code is called an mRNA. It changes the DNA code into a language, into a different language that the cells can understand. And then you've got DNA indexing. You know, every computer requires a data bank. Without it, needed information cannot be retrieved and used. And this is what Don Johnson was telling me. We had dinner on Saturday night. And he said, you know, there's practically 1 million computers within each cell. So anyway, I said, well, what is a computer? And so he went through a detailed analysis. Anyway, I'd like to get to the complexity of the eye. You know, the Lord has said, you know, the seeing eye and the hearing ear, I have created both. And so God is, you know, he created every part of the body, but the fact that he wanted to make special mention to the seeing eye. The human brain contains approximately 100 billion cells. Now I've, you know, looked at that. I've seen that go from 1 billion to 100 billion, but there's a lot of them out there, and we're talking about what kind of cell we're dealing with here, forming about 120 trillion interconnections. The light-sensitive retina of the eye, which is really part of the brain because it is made from the brain, along with the cornea and the lens are actually part of the skin. But it contains over 10 million photoreceptor cells. Each one of these cells captures light pattern formed by the lens and converts it to a complex electrical signal, which are then sent to a special part of the brain where they're noticed as vision. And here's a picture of the eye itself. And of course, we see the different parts of the eye. The whole back portion of it is actually the retina. And the retina actually has more of these cones in the back for color. But it's interesting that the Bible tells us that God's eternal power and nature are clearly seen by the things that are made, and this is one of the most obvious displays of his creative power. Even Charles Darwin conceded that to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different densities, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. But unlike any camera, the retina automatically changes sensitivity to the brightness. Of course, that's what the iris is all about. It actually will adjust. And then the photoreceptors can perceive the range of light, you know, from one photon, single unit of light, to the light in the sun, something that our cameras need to change their f-stops. But actually, there's one other thing that I'd like to mention. You know, the cornea is one lens. It's about 4 times as powerful as the actual lens, but the lens is actually supported by hairs, and they pull and adjust the actual shape of the lens, as opposed to most cameras adjusting the distance from the lens. And then there was an issue that was brought up last time. We've got eye has actually got muscles, and as each muscle contracts, it can lift to the right or to the left, it can up and down. And then there's these are the superior oblique and the inferior oblique, and these rotate the eye to the sockets about 1/4, about as far as you go to the shoulders. And as it rotates, it's doing this very fast, about 40 cycles a second. Oh, okay. Well, I better sit down then. Did somebody say yes? Okay, I'll sit down.
Okay, that was 17 minutes, Dave. So that means you have 13 minutes left for your closing, Don. Unless, Don, do you want to speak now?
No, I'd actually let Dave have the rest of it, and I'll take it to the end if we want to do it that way.
Okay, I'll give my time at the end then.
Okay, 13 minutes between the two of you at the end, right?
Okay.
That's what it is. Okay, looks like we have a little bit more room. So, sir, if you want it outside. I forgot your name. There's more room on the side. They're taking down, so you can back up a little bit. Before we go on to the question and answer period, I know a lot of you have already signed up for the group for just the debate, and I'm compiling all of those addresses. I'm sharing it with Dave, of course. So if you signed up on the last couple debates, you don't have to sign up. But if you're new and want to continue, this is just the debate email list. No other email list will be included. So I'm going to start it this way, and I have a pin on this. Go ahead. There we go. And did everybody get their visas back before we continue? Okay, good. So that concludes the opening statement. Now we're going to go ahead and get a microphone, and Chris here is going to... Sean, did you want to take care of any of the opening statements? I thought you were going to do closing statements.
No.
You were going to do opening statement as well?
Let's just, I'll yield it all just to get to audience Q&A.
Audience Q&A?
Yeah.
So what this means is we are going to go to the Q&A. Chris here will be passing the microphone. We're going to be using that last microphone by you, Dave, to your right of you. So who would like to ask the first question? I'll ask it if nobody else does. Okay, sir, this gentleman right over here. Oh, wait a second, sir. We're going to try to get you on the microphone so the people on the streaming can get you. Streaming video.
Thank you, Mark, for your present. Is this on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, Mark, thank you for your presentation. A couple questions in regards to Adam and Eve. It says that in Genesis 1:26, he made them, 26 to 28, that God made them in his image and likeness, male and female, he made them. And so he made them in his likeness, meaning with intelligence. I'm presuming from that. And he made them as adults so they could procreate. And then he also commanded them to be fruitful, multiply, and to the Hebrew word kabash is often mentioned as subdue, which means to conquer, to subdue, to subjugate. And of course, all the animals were docile.
We'll need a question pretty soon.
Oh, okay. Succinct. So if the way that speaks to me is that he made them mature, he made them in their image, they were intelligent, male and female, he made them, so he had the intention that they would be a normal husband and wife.
And your question is?
How do you get that, number one, they were toddlers, number two, that they weren't equipped to deal with Satan or any other creature like
as far
that?
as them being toddlers, they might have been biologically to look like 21-year-olds, but mentally they'd only been alive 1 week at the most. 1 week. These were babes in the woods. As far as them not being psychologically equipped to handle Satan, how many Christians in this room would even be able to handle Satan with all the knowledge that you have of good and evil? These two kids had zero knowledge and experience of good and evil. They didn't know what a lie was. They didn't. They had no clue that somebody would not tell the truth to them. They were 1 week old mentally. They were children. The whole thing was a setup. They didn't have a chance. Next question.
Actually, Dave, do you have any response, Dave or Don? Because this is a conversational format. You can talk. If after Dave and Don responds to that, sure. Yes.
Hey, I've got a mic here, don't I? There are a lot of different theories. Dave and I don't actually come from the same Christian camp here. I happen to believe that Adam was genetically engineered as an embryo and actually had a mother and an umbilical cord and all of that. As far as ancient Sumerian literature, it's been very badly mistranslated, a lot of it. I have a Sumerian lexicon and have been working my way through it. I'm not real good at it. You miss a lot of the puns in the English. They're all in Sumerian. Eve's name, for example, was T instead of Eve, because there are two places where puns are made, and the word T in Sumerian means both things, but none of the English, Greek, or Hebrew words that it's been translated into since carry into that meaning. the literature style is Sumerian polemic, which you have to understand before you can actually understand what's being said in the second and third chapters. Am I in front of a speaker or something here? Anyway, I don't see Adam as a babe by any means at this time.
Okay, you have another, does anybody have another question before this gentleman takes a, we'll come back to you, sir.
Hi, I'd like for each side to answer this question. I think it'd be interesting. Who made the polio virus, and who do you give credit for the cure of polio?
Good question, and your name is Wayne, is that correct? And I believe, Wayne, you're going to be in the December debate as a debater, is that correct? Right on. And that debate will be, does prayer work? So, questions? Answers?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is mainly for you guys.
Okay. I can't answer you who invented the cure for it. I don't happen to know the man's name off the top of my head. Salk, Sabins? Okay, that's my guess. I remember it showing up in the 1950s, and I was a little too young to be interested, so I apologize for missing that. Although I am not an evolutionist, I am close enough to an evolutionist that I believe that viruses mutate very rapidly. So I am not above saying that God did not design the polio virus. Does that satisfy your question?
Well, who's responsible for finding the cure? That's a follow-up.
Salk,
Okay. Okay, so we have another.
Can I have a shot at that?
Sure.
Well, John 1:1 says that all things were created by God. All would also include the polio virus.
Okay, looks like, oh, we have a rebuttal for that.
John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were created through him is the next verse.
All things were created through him, including polio.
Does not follow, non sequitur. If you create something that can change, for example, if you create chemistry and Mr. Salk comes along and does something with it, he can invent a polio virus. It is not created by God, in spite of the fact that the plain reading seems to say that.
Okay, thanks. Just to be clear, he can create something and then it can change into something else.
You bet.
Okay. Do we win?
Well, that brings me to another question. I'm going to take a small break right now, and I just want a temperature of the room here. I did this before, and we kind of have to know who we're speaking. That's okay, Jeff. Speaking from here, meaning the audience, how many people here are true believer Christians? May I have a raise of hands here? Okay, majority. Looks like we have a majority. And agnostics, any agnostics in here? Okay, and what about true atheists, non-believers? Okay, definitely minority here, so that's what I wanted to find out. Dave, did you have a comment?
Yeah, if I can remember what it was.
Polio. God has created everything.
Since the fall, a lot of things have fallen apart, obviously, but there is variation within each kind. There are, for example, the E. coli virus, for example, mutates. It becomes more viable in certain circumstances against certain antibiotics. However, it's still an E. coli virus. It's not an AIDS virus. If it were, we'd all be in trouble.
So I'm going to have a question before anybody raises their hand. Dave, all the screens that you previously brought up, those were very scientific slides. I imagine you got them from a medical journal or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got
something? Okay. But how do we know all those
sources.
muscles are there? How do we know the cones and the rods and the eye? We know that through science. But you don't believe the scientists that are saying the same things that you're actually promoting on the screen. You're saying these things are so complex. We only know they're complex because of the research and the evidence. if you're saying, yes, we trust the scientists for doing this, but we don't trust them over here on their explanation of how it evolved, aren't those two in the same? You're basically bringing up a proof that you're trying to disprove.
No, all true science would be a creationist science. In fact, that's what I was showing in the first part of it, that almost every scientific discipline was started by a young earth, Bible-believing Christian.
Okay, and how many biologists, biochemists, geneticists, etc., are Bible-believing Christians and believe that it was all created today?
Well, there's a lot of them. Jerry Bergman has a huge list, but a lot of them are afraid to say anything because they're going to lose their job.
That reminds me, because the people that you brought up, a lot of them would be afraid to say that they were not Bible-believing Christians because they would be afraid of losing their lives.
You don't lose your life just simply because you don't, I mean, salvation is a free gift of God. You don't earn it, and you're not going to lose it either. Once you've received Christ, He's not going to, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You're not going to lose your salvation. Yeah, for not standing up for the Lord, yes, you could. There are certain times where you have judgment, most of it temporal type things. You may not be. There's 4 different kinds of forgiveness, just like there would be 4 different kinds.
I apologize if I misspoke. I wasn't talking about judgment from God. I was talking about many of the great scientists you listed as creationists, which many of them were, if not all. I didn't have time to read them all. They were living in a different time. That was my point. You say that biologists cannot say that they believe in creation today because they would lose their job. Well, first of all, this simply isn't true. They can. This is the age of the internet. You can publish quite easily today, and you don't have to be under a university to do so. I think many of us know of the Templeton Foundation here. This is a Christian organization that does a lot of science. First of all, I think I need to make this clear. I'm a fan of the Bible. I don't believe its supernatural claims or its accuracy on its account of creation. However, as far as Christianity is concerned, I think the only rational theological standpoint you can take is young earth creationism, which I take it you are.
Well, I
Just
think
to be clear.
if you're going to hold to the Bible itself, then I would say you would be a young earth creationist, because there are a lot of
That's right.
people who are old earth creationists, but
Yes.
and
I understand. I
I'm
understand.
not
there's both
denying
and
their
not either.
salvation or anything like that. I'm just saying that I don't think it's taking the Bible literally. So
Right. Yeah, and I know Don is.
Although
not a
my
young
point is not to throw David under the bus. I am an old earth creationist and I am creedal. I'm an Orthodox Christian. And David's statement was not that you couldn't publish, it was that you would get fired from your job, which indeed does happen. You can publish.
I wonder, Don, did you get my point?
Could you restate it?
Yeah.
I thought I understood.
About the creationists that he listed, and a lot of them could not have said that they were not Bible-believing Christians without losing a little more than their job.
Are you talking about the period of the Inquisition, for example?
That would be part, yeah.
Okay, that's a little
places,
farther back probably than the...
There's places on Earth today that it would be a bad move.
Saudi Arabia comes to mind.
Now, again, to be clear, I understand the viewpoint from Christianity as far as Christianity's difficulty with biological evolution. For if you take Genesis literally,
Not all creationists, or maybe I should say not all Christians have trouble with evolution. There are theistic evolutions. I don't have...
and I understand that.
Okay.
And I understand that clearly I'm talking to 2 different
Very different.
creationists here, which makes this a little difficult. So if I can I'll just talk.
You want to pick one of us or the other, and the other of us
I'll
will be
just
quiet?
talk, and then you guys can talk amongst yourselves and have it out after that. But I understand from the Bible, if you take Genesis literally, because Genesis does not say that it is a parable. If you take it literally, you do find yourself at least being a creationist. I think young Earth would be a little more rational. It is morning, night, and so on. It does have the genealogies afterwards. But young Earth or old Earth, I don't care. I get it. You kind of have to be a creationist if you believe in the Bible. If you've read the Bible and you still believe in it, if you believe in Jesus as our Savior for our sins because of the fall in the garden in Genesis, where it also accounts for creation, that's kind of all tied together. So if you accept the reality of biological evolution, that becomes quite difficult. The whole New Testament becomes rather questionable, or if not worthless. Jesus' existence, his purpose, the prophecy he fulfills to be our Savior, I understand that. So I understand that viewpoint. I think my issue here, because I've been an atheist my whole life, before I knew what the word was. I was baptized. I went to plenty of sermons. I actually went to seminary school with the Mormons. I just never believed it. Now, for me, if you can disprove evolution tonight, that's lucky me. I was able to witness that historic moment. But it doesn't change it doesn't mean I'm going to suddenly believe that the Quran or the Bible is true, and I'm not going to suddenly think that I should discriminate against homosexuals and women and infidels. It doesn't change my beliefs or faith, because I don't have those. So it doesn't change my point of view at all. You can disprove evolution. It would be very wonderful for me to be able to witness that. Unfortunately, I think it needs to be made clear. This whole discussion is a little confusing to me. I mean, we're having a scientific discussion. I'm not a scientist. My debate partner is not a scientist. My debate opponents are not scientists. I think the room is filled with
I have a BS.
mainly not scientists. If there are any biochemists or geneticists here, I humbly suggest that all of us should set our microphones down and you should come up and talk. If you actually had evidence,
There you go.
if you actually had evidence that was going to disprove evolution or prove intelligent design by Yahweh or any other generic higher power, as vaguely as you want to define it, I don't care, you would not be speaking to us. We would not get this wonderful seat at this historic moment. You would be getting your Nobel Prize and getting your face printed on the new 10-pound note. I mean, this is obviously not a scientific discussion. I mean, you bring up all the science. Everything that they will mention as far as a scientific claim this evening is not evidence of intelligent design. We all know what this is. This is attacks on evolution. And every single thing on his slide was not from a medical journal. It was from answersingenesis.com. And all of those are rebutted on another website called talkorigins.org. If you want to be a little more objective about it, use Google Scholar, where you only search for peer-reviewed scientific published journals. This is not a scientific discussion. I just want to be clear about that. It's impossible because we're not scientists.
Okay, you
This is
just
a theological
introduced
discussion.
me as a non-scientist. I am a degreed scientist.
In what?
My bachelor's is in physics. I did read through the 500 section of the library, though I do not claim to have got to the end. I quit at 579.
In physics, so speed of light, the stars that we see at night, would probably be a big of a push for you to become an old Earth creationist and not a young Earth, I take it.
Indeed, I am an
I would
old
like
Earth
to know how
creationist.
your partner feels about that.
Okay.
I don't know. Give the mic to them. Ask a question.
I think that what Sean was trying to ask is that there might be a difference between old Earth creationism and young Earth creationism. That actually is not the subject for tonight, but I think that you should at least rebut it for 30 seconds to a minute between the two of you, because there are obviously some theological differences between the two of you, even though you're still debating intelligent design, right? So how can you equate the similarities between intelligent design and still have opposite theocratic
I honestly
theologies?
doubt there are two of us in the room who agree completely about everything. Dave and I certainly disagree about things, but I thought the topic tonight would be something we could be on the same side for. And if we change the topic, then of course we'll have a different debate, but that would be a red herring, which isn't a proper technique for a debate.
Okay, let's have another question then. Would you agree with that?
Let me respond to that. What you were saying is it doesn't matter where the source is. I know Dave Menton personally. He speaks to the top 1% of medical students in America, and yes, he did write some of those articles. But I talked to him on the phone for 4 hours one time. I mean, he and I are friends. So yes, I'm not a biochemist, but you don't have to be, for example, an artist to be a good art critic. And everybody can read. You can only be an expert maybe in one thing. in your whole life. At least that's what Henry Morris said. But he was an expert in so many things in the sense that he was able to read all of this stuff and you can understand it. I mean, words do communicate knowledge, and they're able to communicate something that we can understand. Otherwise, they'd be out there on their own. Nobody would understand them. I do go to the International Creation Conference. I did speak at the International Creation Conference, which only meets once every 5 years this last time. And so I am familiar with these guys. I work with them. I talk to them. I mean, in a lot of disciplines. And so, I mean, here I am with, like I said before, one time with Jerry Bergman. And I asked Jerry, I said, here he's got 400 doctorates and 9 master's degrees. I said, Jerry, has anybody ever seen a mutation, a positive mutation? And he said, wait till the rest of them get here. We had 200 leading scientists from all over the planet in that room, and he said, no, nobody's ever seen a positive mutation. Yet you need 1 billion positive mutations to get a new organ of some kind, and you have to permeate the population barrier with that. You need to get a male and female, and then you have to locate it in the right part of the body and connect it to all the other organs. So anyway, and that's according to Ernest Meyer, the only way you're ever going to get
David,
any kind of evolution in the
if
vertical scale.
evolution
Anyway.
is absolutely positively disproven, how does that prove Bible God?
Okay, let me
How?
answer that.
Explain that to me, please.
Okay. What I'm saying is that there's only 2 possible world views. Either there's a theistic explanation for things or a non-theistic. Either God did it or he didn't. Either it happened naturally or
Which
supernaturally.
God? Let's say, for sake of argument,
Well, let me-
evolution is absolutely false. The world was created. Now, there's a million gods to pick from. How do you prove that Jehovah is the one that did it?
Okay.
Where is the fossil evidence for that, please?
Okay. The fossil evidence?
Yes. Some real tangible evidence.
Well, as Carl Dunbar said, fossils are the only evidence that evolution has occurred on this planet, and of course, nobody's ever found a transitional form so far.
A transitional form between what and what?
Well, anyway, that wasn't the question. Let me go back to let me answer his question first.
So
Let's stay on Bible God right now.
Let me answer his question
That's
first,
right.
and then we'll go to that.
That's
okay. So anyway, that was an aside. I didn't mean to. But yeah, that's a very good question. I appreciate the actual opportunity to answer it because, yeah, once you've decided that it couldn't happen naturally, and that's all I was trying to do. I just showed that it's not likely to happen naturally simply because in observable space and observable time, nothing, first of all, doesn't create something.
Okay, we grant the argument.
then-
it was created.
Okay.
Prove it was created by
Yes.
Jehovah.
Yes, I was just one more half a sentence and I would have been there.
I agree with you. Who does?
Okay, so let's assume it had to happen supernaturally. Then we ask the question, well, okay, how can I know? I mean, with 1 million of God, there was 330 million gods in India at one time, at least. And I say, well, okay, how do I know which one is the correct one? In fact, so I look around the world and I look out throughout the gamut of literature available to us as humans, and I find only one book that passes the test required to be the Word of God, and that's the Bible. And the
I
4
just
tests
showed
that
the
I
first
give.
3 chapters of Genesis are basically nonsense. They are gobbledygook.
Well,
And I
that's
got $100 I'm willing to pay to anybody that can reconcile Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Genesis
well.
is crap.
Let me finish my statement, because I don't believe that has any bearing on what we're dealing with here. The book of Genesis makes a whole lot of sense to me. But anyway, it does. It explains origins. It explains in the verse, chapters 10 and 11. It shows the formation of the nations. It explains so many things that we don't have answers to from any other source. But apart from that, so I look throughout the literature that available to us, and I ask these 4 questions: inerrancy, preservation, illumination, and inerrancy.
Where is the fossil
inspiration.
evidence for Adam and Eve? Where is the fossil evidence for
Let me-
women being created from a rib? Where is any evidence whatsoever that anything in first 3 chapters of Genesis is true? One piece of evidence, please.
Okay, I'm going to give it to you. Will you let me answer? Okay, so
I put my hand up when I have a question.
I'll give it to you right after. Inspiration. Okay, the idea is that the Bible itself is like We believe that inspiration comes from a Greek word, theopneustos, literally means God breathed or God directed. It's like a master musician playing a piano. Each one of the keys on the piano has a different sound, just like each one of the apostles and prophets had a different personality, but God superintended the finished product so that it was without error. And of course, it had to be without error, otherwise I'd need a red letter edition to tell me what's true and what isn't, what to teach my children, if I had any, what to send my missionaries out with. And so the Bible makes a challenge to all the other religious writings in the world. In Isaiah 43:10, 44, 45, and 46, it says, I, the Lord, am one God. There's none else beside me, before me, or that shall come after me. He's able to tell the end from the beginning. So if God's in charge, he's the only one that's going to tell the future.
I think we should give the mic to Don. He's been very patient.
Trying to be anyway. The question, as I understand it, is how do we know which God? I've written a book on it. It's posted online. It's called Who Designed God? I can give you a brief rundown of what I do. I head through all the different interesting scientific fields, including cosmology and biology and evolutionary biology, specifically artificial intelligence, and all of the different fields that bear on any issue of weirdness in science, and there are a lot of them. And at the end, we have a picture sketched in of all the odd missing pieces. And like a scientist, you look at a bunch of different things that don't seem to fit. You come up with a theory, and if it fits all of the data at once and looks real clean, you don't know for sure, but you have a shot at it. And the book ends with a shot at which God it is, and asks answers enough questions, and then asks some more questions that you can sketch it in. I'm not going to name the God, but you'll recognize him.
I think we should have another question. That's about time. And I think Brady had his first. Boy, look at all of them up now. So we'll go with. Okay, we'll go with you, and then Brady's next.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Just the first question that I would ask, especially to the fellow wearing the God Loves You shirt, I would just ask humbly that you be at least respectful of the other point of view that's being expressed, instead of using terms that are riddled with sarcasm and terms that are riddled with just offensive terminology. Just be careful, be respectful. The other question that I would ask you is this: do you have any ability to be able to read any of the original language of the book of Genesis? And if you don't, then what would give you any kind of standing authority to be able to make the kind of assertions that you've made regarding language or translation?
Real quick, does that stop any Christians from making assertions?
I think at times it does, sure.
At times? Okay, I'll let him answer that, but
I'll be absolutely consistent with that. I would say yes. I would say at times it does, absolutely. I think you need to be well versed in those things before you make certain assertions, absolutely.
I completely agree. Have you read?
Damien, I'm going to stop you. We have to wait and keep this in order. Sorry, Damien.
Let me.
I do read those languages.
Yeah, let me respond to that.
One person at a time.
Do you read Arabic?
I speak Arabic.
So you're saying that, since you read Arabic, would you say that the only people in the entire world qualified to criticize the Quran would be those who speak Arabic?
Oftentimes, yes.
No.
I would
Oftentimes?
argue that. Yes. Because
So a
oftentimes-
translation is not adequate.
Because oftentimes they make assertions that are inaccurate concerning the particular language, and they have not taken the time to take a look at the language.
Which particular part of Genesis did I assert that I screwed up?
Well, you have a very distinct misunderstanding concerning Genesis 1:27, and some of the claims that you make regarding the language are not correct, because you have to come to certain conclusions with the things that you say with respect to the language to be able to make the assertions that you make.
So
And those
you're
assertions are
saying
incorrect.
basically it takes a PhD to understand anything about the Bible, unless we have a
I'm not
PhD
saying that it
in
takes a
ancient
PhD.
languages, that we shouldn't criticize your religion.
I'm not saying that it takes a PhD. I'm saying
No,
that
it
it simply
doesn't.
takes somewhat of a
And-
familiarity and an understanding
And your
of those
Bible
things,
is the one that
which you
says
seem to
it
not
is-
have, sir. That's
the
all I'm
Apostle
asking.
Paul was proud of not many educated being in the Christian movement. He was
However,
proud
he was
of the
fluent-
humbleness.
However, he was fluent in Hebrew.
You're saying the opposite.
However, he was fluent in the Greek language. He was fluent in Hebrew. He was fluent in Aramaic.
But he said
and
it
certainly
didn't matter.
had absolutely
It didn't matter.
every bit of authority.
It
I think
didn't-
we're going to go to another question. What do you
Let's
say about
focus
that?
the
Bottom line
questions.
is you're not answering the question.
Well, wait a second.
Let's focus the
We
questions.
don't have the
to
time to answer
panel.
all the questions, but I think we have to go to Brady because he was next, right, Chris? Brady's over here.
If we can stretch back here in the corner.
No, right here in the middle
Right
here.
here. Okay.
Question, please.
Okay. I'm asking this because I'm just confused. Now, as I understand
We
it,
all are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. If I understand it, your position, Sean, is that you don't know if God exists, but you don't believe in any gods. Is that correct?
Sorry, I apologize.
You don't know if God exists, but you have no belief in any gods. Is that correct? Did I read that
I have
right?
no absolute knowledge of the non-existence of any deity. Same as leprechauns, but yeah, I don't have any reason. I've never found any good reason or evidence to believe in any.
Yeah. Okay. And do you hold that same position, Mark? I didn't know. It wasn't in your bio.
I am an absolute disbeliever in the existence of Yahweh.
Well,
I think that the evidence, the preponderance of evidence is he cannot exist. Other gods, I don't know.
Okay, that's all I asked. If you held the same position as he did. Okay. Now, if you do not know if gods do or do not exist, my question is, how can you say that there is no design in the universe? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I believe so. I also don't remember saying that.
Oh, I thought that and this is why I'm so confused between what's going on here.
I mean, when you say design, do you mean that someone designed it,
Yes.
or do you mean that it looks designed?
Intended. Well, okay, now you say looks designed. Is it your position that nothing is designed?
It is my position that there is zero evidence that I have been privy to that proves that something was designed. Hold on, we're talking biology, cosmology,
Right.
not watches, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm understanding you a little bit better, and that's all I wanted to do is to understand your position better.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same side.
And Brady, I think that that's what we're here for. We're trying to understand each positions better. Some people might get offended, some people might not. But we still have to tolerate those that are anti-theist as much as we can tolerate those that are literal Muslims. You know, we have to tolerate both sides no matter how much we disagree on them. Is that right? That's what we're here for.
My presentation was to show that there's neither intelligence nor design in the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. I am strictly dealing with Jehovah, not any other deity.
Okay, next question. And Damien was so loud. Oh, right there, Kent. Kent and then Damien over here. Okay, Kent.
I have a quick question for the creationists, and I don't have the benefit, I arrived late, I apologize, I don't have the benefit of having heard the opening statement, so my question is, presumably, David, that your supposition is that the human being was created in its present form by a creator, a designer. So my question is about the vestigial or redundant structures in the human body. Specifically, I'm going to name 2. There's many, but I'm going to name 2. Number 1 is going to be the coccyx or the tailbone, which only makes sense if an organism that came before the human being had a tail, and we lost our tail at some point, and that's why we still have the vestigial organ of the tailbone or the coccyx. Number 2 is going to be the appendix, which if we were created 7,000 years ago in our present form, in which we don't eat grasses and we don't require a cecum or an appendix where we have to break down cellulose, it makes no sense for us to carry around this organ in our bodies that only serves the function at this point of killing us when it becomes infected and develops an abscess and then can kill us. And that's all it does nowadays. So it only makes sense that we have an appendix if the human organism is much, much older, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years older, and we carry it from a time when we were a grassland organism that consumed large amounts of cellulose and grasses and things and leaves like that. And we had to break those things down, and so we could digest them. That's why we have an appendix. So my question is, if we were designed and we didn't evolve from other organisms and we're not much older than 7,000 years or 10,000 years or whatever you would support as a young Earth creationist and designed organism theory, how do you explain the vestigial redundant organisms in the human body?
Since you said young Earth, the question is today.
Okay, I'll let you take it too, because I'd be curious about your answer. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, Jerry Bergman wrote a book called dealing with just those vestigial organs, and actually the tailbone itself is actually connecting almost all the muscles in our body. It's all linked to that. It's a very important part of our body. And then the appendix makes great fish bait. I know for people that had to remove it, but actually they found certain diseases that it does help, and I don't remember what they were, but I do know he had come up with several uses for the appendix, and I apologize for not knowing it. But I would like to respond to one other thing you said, which was also kind of a concept that had to do with the eye. And you were saying, well, why did God design it so poorly? Because this was on our last debate, he has the photoreceptor cells on the opposite end from the light coming in. But all vertebrates, in fact, all vertebrates and all mammals have it that way. And I mentioned the fact that, yes, the eagle also has it, and he can see a fish a foot underwater from a mile away, so it doesn't hurt his vision anymore. But there's also the Mueller cell, and you probably know what the Mueller cell is. It was discovered about 200 years ago, but it's actually it's fiber optics, and it can actually bend corners, and it actually takes that light from the beginning, from right in the front, and right back into the photoreceptor cell at the end. And of course, you need those cells at the end because it's the most active cell in our body. It dies every 7 days, so that it has to be scorfed up by these other cells, and the bloodstream is carrying it away. That 95% of that blood is in the back of the eye, which it needs to be. So there's a blood sandwich there, but it's perfect design. God is not a bad designer.
Okay, we have Damien, and any hands for the next question? Sir, you, and then you. And
Did Kent want me to answer that too?
yes, I was just kind of waiting for somebody to butt in.
All right, I don't butt in very well. I usually wait for a chance. I have kind of an odd theory on this. I am a tongue-in-cheek punctuated equilibriist. Another name for my theory might be the surrogate mother theory, or God creates by overshadowing. In the book of Luke, we find that Jesus is born because the Holy Spirit overshadowed his mother. He has a human mother, no human father. How do you get a Y chromosome? Obviously, whatever overshadowing means in the text, it has to do with genetically engineering a Y chromosome. Adam is called the Son of God in Luke chapter 3, and Mary is told to call the one born the Son of God because the Holy Spirit overshadowed his mother. If Adam is called the Son of God for the same reason, then we know that Adam's mother was overshadowed. Now, if you're going to start with a single blue-green algae cell and make everything else using the same mechanism that's described in Luke chapters 1 and 3, you would overshadow a lot of individuals. Sometimes it would be a female, sometimes the distinction doesn't apply, meaning that God would genetically engineer at times. So what you would see in the fossil record, if that were the case, would be a series of sudden leaps, which is what you see in the fossil record. You would also see a series of small leaps because you can't have a baby mouse give birth to a baby elephant. In fact, Rh factors in blood indicate that the leaps would have to be very small indeed. So you would see the Darwinian tree in the core structure, but you would see the Gould-Eldridge fine steps in the fine structure. So what you would see is exactly what the fossil record says. I think it's a pretty tight theory.
That's a very interesting statement that you just made because it completely contradicts.
We disagree
Yes.
on that.
Okay, very good. Okay, Damien, your
I'm gonna
turn.
strangle him after the.
Okay, I wanted to bring
And
up.
make sure it's a question, okay, Damien?
It's a question. I love to make statements. I'm a very hard atheist. Okay, my question though is from Genesis 3:1. The serpent is created as an animal. It says, "Now the serpent was made the most crafty of any of the animals the Lord had made." Can you tell me how the serpent is still the devil if he's one of the animals? And if he's one of the animals, How is he not perfect since the Lord made everything perfect?
You know you're going to be angry at me. Okay. The particular story you're telling from Genesis is written originally in ancient Sumerian. It's of a style of literature called Sumerian polemic. There are other Sumerian polemic pieces of literature. The most famous of them is the hoe and the plow, or maybe it's the plow and the hoe. I've forgotten which order the title goes. In order to understand the story, you have to understand the style that it's written in. And it makes perfect sense when you understand that. In polemic literature, the hoe and the plow speak, even though they are not considered to be living objects. It's the writing style, it's how it's written. You'll have a discussion where a couple of different inanimate objects, in this case, say something to each other, and then one of the gods, perhaps Enlil, steps in and explains the meaning of the story at the end. It appears to be written that way, and I would judge it that way, since that's how the Sumerians would have understood the story who read it in its original form.
Could I have a shot at that? Revelation 12:9, and the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan. It has traditionally been understood that the serpent in the book of Genesis was the devil.
Okay, I think that we have a question here. This gentleman here, and then you, sir. Gentleman in the gray sweater. Chris, thank you.
I think we agreed on something.
Okay, hello. I have two questions, neither of which will require a verbal response from the panel. The first question, by a show of hand, up or down, put your hand up, if you feel that the author of the first few chapters of Genesis intended it to be a complete scientific treatise on the origin of man and the origin of the universe. Second question, and this is rhetorical, so no answer needed. If the Bible had been intended to be a scientific treatise, how many tablets, of clay tablets with writing on them, would be required to make it a scientific treatise on the origin of man and the origin of the universe? Thank you.
Looks like we do have a response here.
I would like to just comment on that. It's a good observation. I agree with you. But if I were to write everything that happened in your life or my life since this morning, and I wrote about everything that was going on with all the cells in the body and the various other things that are happening, it would contain volumes that the world couldn't contain such a volume. So you have to be selective in any kind of history.
I'm going to interrupt, sir. You're next right after me. I see the awesomeness, Dave and Don. I see the awesomeness of our cellular structure, of the human genome. But if by any chance we looked back at a previous hominid that lived 200,000 years ago, that was almost like us, but had all of the same features. It had the appendix, it had a tailbone, and then I looked another 200,000 years, and there was another hominid. All these fossils are very well documented. And I keep on going back, and I see all the way back to a rat, a mouse, a smaller mammal, and it has all the same bone structure we have, even the whale does before it evolved from a deer. And I take a look at all this history. If you saw the history of this and how marvelous it was, and see how we are related to all of these previous ancestors, and we can look back and see the genome change between all of these, would it convince you that evolution is true?
Well, hypothetical questions don't ever usually occur, so that is a question that is totally hypothetical. If we were to see that, would I be convinced? Well, the fact is, I wouldn't be convinced because first of all, that evidence is not there. Second of all, I believe God's word. So I'm a presuppositionalist. I would believe God's word above all things. But obviously, I don't believe that God would contradict what we see. I mean, obviously, everything we see around us confirms the word instead of goes against what the Bible teaches. So.
Actually, I see a microphone held by Sean here. If he wants to say anything. Go ahead.
Okay. Since I'm a tongue-in-cheek punctuated equilibriist, none of those fossils bother me if you want to make me into a gradualist instead of someone who believes there were sudden leaps that are too large to account for by Darwinian selection. Then you would have to convince me that the fossil record was different than what it is. The leaps seem to be there. Richard Dawkins doesn't see them. The one time I went at it with Richard Dawkins, it didn't end very well for Richard Dawkins, and I don't want to dwell on this. The problem was he took a theological position of God being complex, which you've heard him do before, and I asked if that was a falsifiable position, that he had taken his hypothesis, and the audience couldn't stand it and absolutely lost it at that point. You make even an atheist like Dawkins has a belief about what God has to be like, and the God I have isn't that I answer to isn't like most of the gods that are kicking around in different theologies. The steps that you see in the fossil record are about as far as you can bend a species without killing the mother. Interbreeding between species works out to be limited by about the same thing. So a dog and a fox, or a wolf and a dog, or a mule or a donkey and a horse are about as far as you can go, and the steps in the fossil record are that sized. That's too big a leap to do one mutation at a time.
Isn't that just an argument from ignorance? Because you said that your Christians said that 50 years ago, and since then we discovered hundreds of different fossils, and we will in the future.
And I will explain why it is not. We found hundreds of different fossils, but they all have small steps. The steps are actually there, which was the argument Gould and Eldridge meant. There's a database of 30,000 marine invertebrates that they did this on and statistically analyzed. The gaps, the jumps are really there. They're very small, and they're all within roughly breeding range. The reason why that can't possibly be what would happen under Darwin's theory is population genetics. The mathematics, which was originally worked out by J.S.B. Haldane centuries ago, well, 1 century ago anyway, and change, says that population or evolutionary growth is regulated by the mutation rate. It's the population mutation rate, meaning a larger population will have more mutations in it than a small one. So a large population, for example, fruit flies or bacteria, mutate faster than a small population because they have so many targets out there catching the favorable mutations, which is why I can say with complete clear conscience that I believe viruses change over time. They have a large enough population.
Considering the flu shot is different every year, you're perfectly right.
Yeah, absolutely. They're able to do that. Giraffes don't do so well. California condors don't do so well. If their numbers get down, it doesn't work. The fossil record shows the change happening suddenly when the population is so small that you can't even see it.
So what you're saying is you don't know how that happened.
No, what I'm saying is that it couldn't possibly have happened any faster than it happens in a big population where all the mutations are happening and what drives it. When you look at the big populations, they stay the same. This is observable fossil evidence. This is not ignorance or argument from ignorance.
I'd love to have a biologist here on the panel someday.
I did read that section in the library.
Or someone that didn't pull a source from 100 years ago.
Okay.
J.S.B. Haldane was 100 years ago. The modern population genetics books say the same thing. It's still true that large populations evolve faster.
I would only like to hear what Dave has to say in regards to all the fossil evidence.
Well, as I said before, Carl Dunbar said fossils provide the only evidence that evolution has occurred on this planet. And yet in the largest population of fossils that we have had was at the British Museum, and Dr. Colin Patterson, who, had the largest collection, and he wrote a book called Evolution, and in that book he didn't include any transitional forms, and Dr. Sutherland wrote him back and said, I noticed you didn't include any transitional forms in your book on fossils, and he said, I would have loved to include some transitional forms if I'd had any, but I couldn't even tell an artist how to draw one because I don't know what one would look like. And the whole idea of a transitional form in the first place doesn't make any sense because the animal isn't able to swim or fly or do anything adequately because it's in transition, yet not only does it have to survive, it has to be the only one to survive, yet it's the least capable of surviving. So this whole concept, I mean, the idea of punctuation is a little bit of a problem too because according to Stephen Jay Gould, every 50,000 years, all of a sudden you get billions or millions of mutations. Well, that's going to kill the species. I mean, that's what happens when we have, new explosions and,
We're going to go to the next question right after
Hold on,
Sean.
can we go back to one more question, because it seems it's come up again. What transitional forms do we not have?
We have none. But
Do
there's
you know
variation
can you
within
verify? Can you?
Okay, there's
can
variation
you,
within the kind. Yes, we've
no,
got
no,
different
hold
kinds
on,
of
hold on.
cats.
Can
and
you
different kinds of
clarify
dogs.
to me what you mean when you say transitional form?
Well, a dat or a cog, half dog, half cat. There's about the closest one you could come up with. Or half
I
person,
don't know
half
how to
egg.
answer that because they come from two different previous ancestors. You can't have it half dog, half cat.
Look, this is why non-paleontologists and non-biochemists shouldn't be up here talking about science. This is nonsense. Listen.
What do you want to talk about?
We have everyone here has Google in their pocket right now. Yeah, I mean you're making statements that are only a display that your ignorance of the subject is a life choice. I mean, you have a very you give speeches and debates and you have these pieces of information like the cog, and you haven't bothered to pull out your phone and look it up. That's not what taxonomy would even say. And if you want to if we want to play a game, we can just pull up your.
You don't have to get angry. I'm just talking about we don't have these things.
Oh no, I'm having fun. Don't worry about that. My emotions are not my concern. This is gorgeous fun for me. If you want, we can pull your computer back on the display here, and we can look at the ancestry of Philidaes all the way back for every fossil we have, and you tell me when it's no longer a cat. And then we'll all go around and and ask each other, when is it no longer a cat? When? But then what is it? Then what is it? It's something else.
That's the whole point.
Yes, that's the point of evolution.
There are no transitional points that you can...
No. I'm talking about all the transitional points because we do have transitional... Every single fossil that exists is a transitional fossil. That's why I wanted clarification as to what transition... Hold on. I'm getting confused because I can hear my mic and I can't hear yours. That could be it. Listen, every single fossil is a transitional form. That's how evolution works. There's no stopping. There's no stopping. Every single fossil is a transitional form.
That's how gradualism works. Punctuated equilibrium works differently.
Are you a 100% punctuated equilibriumist?
I am a tongue-in-cheek punctuated equilibriumist.
Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, I believe that the fossil record accurately reflects what happened. I do not believe that, as Gould and Eldridge hypothesized, that evolution happens very quickly in small populations.
Okay, so you're not a complete...
I am not
punctuated.
Exactly what the standard punctuated equilibrium says.
So you're somewhere in the middle, leaning on the side of punctuated.
I'm not bending it. I'm outside of both positions completely.
Outside of
the
both
evidence
positions.
presented.
There's been a lot of that this evening.
The evidence presented by the gradualists, which is population genetics, flatly falsifies punctuated equilibrium.
Yes, I'm going to interrupt right now. Does anybody here not know what punctuated equilibrium is? Please raise their hands. Okay. Can you please explain in layman's terms what punctuated equilibrium is by Gould?
Okay. Punctuated equilibrium states that evolution happens when a population is isolated from the main population. The theory is that there is something like momentum involved. A large population cannot evolve quickly because it's lumbering. A small population can quickly zip back and forth, and so when some small group of individuals gets isolated from the main population, they evolve quickly and ended up being something else, and when they establish themselves, then they show up again in the fossil record. Gradualism says that can't possibly happen because evolution happens in large populations and not in small populations. Therefore, you must see the change in large populations instead of small ones, and in some cases they deny what is seen in the fossil record.
So, do I get it right that you insert God in the populations that quickly mutate?
That is so far the only explanation I've encountered that is not falsified by one side's facts or the other side's
So
facts.
that's the argument of ignorance, in my opinion, because
No, it is.
Anytime you insert God here, in another 100 or 2,000 or 5,000 years, will
I
be
don't
the answer.
remember saying I inserted God. What I said is that gradualism has been falsified. It is no longer a viable theory. Punctuated equilibrium has been falsified. It is no longer a viable scientific theory. I am positing an hypothesis. I'm calling it the surrogate mother theory. It is not falsified by any of the evidence that I know of. If you want to falsify my theory, produce evidence, and then I will say, oh, I was wrong. I've been wrong before, and I've changed my position by falsifying
That's why I like
evidence.
you, Don.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
Yes, question and answer, and this was one right here. And who would like the next question? Okay, the sir right here. Wait. You're next. You're next. I'm just kind of
We'll have
leading
the mic
into
in
it,
a
that's all.
moment. Dave, this question is for Mark, is that correct, who spoke first? Oh, yes, thank you very much for coming, and everybody, by the way. I have just a question. Do you hate God? And if not, why did you make your speech that way?
Why did I make my speech what?
Why did you make your speech your opening speech, the way that you did?
I don't hate imaginary beings, but the God of the Bible does, because you Christians believe a lot of those deities that are mentioned in the Bible that are not Jehovah don't really exist. And your Lord God seemed to hate those other deities to the point where he would execute anybody that tried to follow them. So your deity has a problem with other deities. I don't have a problem with imaginary friends. I have a problem with their followers when they start shoving their imaginary beliefs down my throat and trying to control the government and take over the world. As far as my presentation of Genesis,
It wasn't aimed at Christians. It was aimed at the first 3 chapters.
yeah, I think the deity that's portrayed in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is revulsive. I think he is abhorrent. I think he is horrible. And I also think he doesn't exist. I think that if you had any moral fiber in you and you thought about it, you would come to the same conclusion.
I think that what Mark meant was that if he did exist, he is this. He has these attributes. He does not believe that that particular God exists. But if he did, he would be. Okay. Yeah, that's. Well, he didn't say that. I'm kind of paraphrasing. Is that right, Mark? Is that accurate? Okay, sir. I think you're next, and we only have 1 or 2 left until our closing statement.
Okay. I'm claiming the $100 bill.
Wait. Yeah. Hold on. Do you want to do that at the end?
Okay.
Do we have a question?
Here it is. Here it is. Nicholas.
Can I get the slide up first? Let me find it. Just give me a moment. This will just take a moment.
You know, I'm waiting for this to actually happen, and I'd be amazed if you could do this, because he's had this for quite a while.
Who are the judges?
We'll need a true agnostic to be the judge. I don't know if there's any of them here or not. While you're bringing up the slide, Mark, go ahead, sir, with your...
Somebody back there move to just a little bit so it's centered. A little bit more. There we go. There we go. Okay. John? Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Essentially, when we're talking about Genesis, we're talking about something that was written for cultures 3,000 years ago. Okay, I'm not real good with this. Okay, so kind of keep reminding me. We're talking about culture, something that was written for cultures about 3,000 years ago. Okay, and people in cultures 3,000 years ago are not likely to know too much about an awful lot of different things. And so there was really no intent there to go out and provide any kind of a literal description of the universe and everything else in it. What we really have here is an introduction to the drama of the ages. We've got the cast of characters that are being introduced in the 3 chapters there. We've got God, and specifically mentioned as the Spirit and Son. We've got animals and vegetation. We've got humanity, men and women. We've got
What I was hoping for is you would put them in sequence where you blend the two chapters
you said
together.
you asked for reconciliation.
No.
I'm giving you a reconciliation. What you're
Sequencing.
trying to do is
Read the
change.
title.
You're trying to change.
Read the
you're
title.
trying to change
Sequencing.
the deal here.
Read the title. Sequencing. Sequencing.
No, your statement was reconciling Genesis. And reconciling Genesis is not literal, okay? It's just to go out and introduce the dramatis personae of the drama of the ages. Put your microphone down, I'm still talking.
What's your question?
Okay. And because it's not literal, it's just introducing the individual characters there. There's the sequence here really doesn't matter. This is just bringing out some ideas here to go out and help people at that particular cultural level understand things.
Can anybody sequence them? I still got this $100 bill. You don't get it, sir. Sorry.
You said I could have another opportunity.
Well, sure, if nobody is... I was expecting everybody to have 10 questions here, is really what I was expecting. So go ahead, sir.
Okay, my question is, would you agree with scientific statements from 2 scientific disciplines? The first one is from the NASA scientist who built these huge radio telescopes down in South America, say 30 years ago, peering into the universe. They want to find out if there's life on other planets. And how would they know that? They're listening in to see if there's some broadcast radio waves like we send out. And if there's a language code coming from one of those planets, what would that tell them? That would tell them there's intelligent life on other planets. That's why they spent millions of dollars and still maintaining those devices. So the NASA scientists know that language codes only come from an intelligent mind. Would everybody agree with that? Or would you agree with that? That's number one. Number two, the geneticists always state, as I'm reading them, that the DNA code is a digitized error-correcting code of information. According to the NASA scientists, codes of information only come from an intelligent mind. Do you agree with that?
I don't, but go for it, John.
First of all, they were looking for radio waves, hoping that they would find pictures of their version of Star Wars and Star Trek and Gilligan's Island, just as we've sent out. So they weren't exactly looking for... The problem with this is fuzzy language here. You're saying intelligence. You're calling DNA intelligent language. You're calling television radio waves intelligent language. I mean, if you want to say that DNA has intelligent language in it, you can say the same thing for crystals. You can say the same thing for a lot of things. Anything you can break down into a formula, you can call it an intelligent language. That doesn't mean that an intelligence wrote it, that it's actually a language that tells you something. The DNA is not a book. The Bible's a book. I wouldn't call all of it intelligent. Some of it is very intelligent. Genesis might not be, but that's that's language. You're mixing things up. So no, I do not think that if we got a signal of Gilligan's Island with green or gray faced people on it, that would be the same as what we see in DNA and therefore God. No, that doesn't add up. No.
That's also what's called a category error, because when you're mentioning DNA as information, you're confusing that with something intelligent that might have made it when it could have also happened naturally. Like a snowflake, for instance. A snowflake is beautiful, it has information, it has a design to it. Do you think that actually was intelligent design? No, of course not. It was naturally designed. So I think that's called a category error. The what has a purpose? The what has a purpose? Code has a purpose. Oh, I see, yes.
Yes.
Just like the code, put your eyes where they're at, put your ears where they're at,
Yes.
put your mouth where it's at,
Is
and
this
so
on?
on. It's coded to do that. That is information, coded information for a logical
I get it. Yeah, he's saying that DNA, the information in DNA, has a purpose. Again, purpose is fuzzy language in this scenario. Now, calling it purpose, saying that it was written with intent, and that's not the case. Now, DNA, certain parts of DNA may code for certain proteins that do certain things, but that doesn't mean that it got there because someone wanted that and therefore put it there. The purpose of purpose is not a word you can use with DNA. Certain things do certain things. It doesn't. Well, according to someone that's not willing to assert something that they don't know. Okay, you don't know that there's no evidence that it was written with intent. There is evidence that it was written badly and failed, that it was written differently and changed nothing, and that it was written differently and made something different. And sometimes those something different worked and stuck around. Sometimes something bad worked or didn't work, but it still stuck around because of another issue. There's no evidence that it was written by some higher power or intelligence with any intended purpose. Purpose is a funny word to use when you're talking about DNA coding. The proteins that DNA codes for were not there with intended purpose. There's no evidence of that. There is evidence that we have proteins that work badly, that do things differently, that do nothing at all. There's plenty of evidence to show that things just happen. Something doing something doesn't mean that it was intended to do that.
I have the mic, and I have the next turn here, actually.
Yes, you do.
Microphone. I see your face as having purpose. You're speaking to me intelligently. That's a purpose.
Do I shout him down or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes, you shout him down. Yes, you're at the microphone.
I have the microphone, I have the floor, according to Bruce here. Oddly, I plan to talk on this, which I haven't given.
Please don't do it now. We're running out of time.
It refers to DNA as a code and goes through the mathematics of it. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I might be able to run through it quick.
I have a friend that is a biologist that would love to debate you, but I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful debate for another time. Could you reserve your explanation for another time?
My talk was on the cells. Instead of the eye and the ear, the cells that make up the humans are specifically the first cell and all subsequent cells. And I can do that at some other time if you like.
I appreciate it. Yes, we have one more question. And who hasn't talked? This gentleman back here hasn't talked. The redhead with a beard. I'm trying to spread it around, guys. You'll have to excuse my informality of being a moderator.
By the way, these are my two sons.
And I reject him as my father because he's worthless as a human being. Damien.
Thank you.
My personal opinion. If he's gonna shout out and say
please,
it,
Damien, seriously, please. Anyways, the question is actually for all four of you, and it obviously it's gonna break them in different ways. The question is, why do men have primitive mammary glands and nipples? So, but it's for both sides. I want to hear both of your guys' description, and then you guys have you can have different ones if you want, but to describe basically those two things: primitive mammary glands and nipples on men, only on men.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that question. I'll give you the same answer that Jerry Bergman gave. He said that basically it's the most sensitive part of the body. And the reason is because it's something that, for sex, I mean, it actually stimulates the male body. And so that's, purposely a perfectly legitimate reason.
Well, I didn't get those codes. That's not the most sensitive part of my body, and it doesn't turn me on.
That's what he says.
Hey, well, people say a lot of things.
Now we know a little bit more about Dave, so.
I'm just repeating what a leading biochemist said.
There is a reason for that, and if you look on talkorigins.org, you will find the biological reason why all mammals have mammary glands. From rats to mice to giraffes to both. Every mammal on Earth has those, and it's based in biology. I'm not going to go further than that. Sean, unless you want to go further than that.
No, we also have wisdom teeth. They don't seem to be very wise for us to have, but...
I'll pass.
Okay. So now, if there's only one more question left at a time, anybody that has not answered, Michael, you're back there. This is the atheist side of the room. You could tell because it's hotter. So, Michael, you're it. Chris, thank you, Chris. Great hand for Chris here to being our microphone traveler here. He volunteered.
My question is kind of for Dave, but maybe it could be followed up by Sean. When I was in my 20s, I was a young Earth creationist, and I found myself believing all the exact same things and basically spouting all the same facts. And then over time, I took up a position more like the old world viewpoint. As I studied evidence, I eventually gave up my belief that the Earth was young because I looked at the world that I lived in. Eventually, I came to read books like The Selfish Gene and other Dawkins books. So my question to you is, it seems to me that a lot of your arguments, like asking about where a half a dog and a half a cat is, not as an insult, but you really don't understand the theory you're trying to refute. And I know this personally because I said the same things as you, but when I learned, I'm not saying you can't still not believe in evolution, but you would do yourself a favor and us a favor if you actually understood that the thing you're trying to refute, because nobody in evolution thinks there should be half a cat, half a dog. That's not the theory. So my question is, what have you studied? Is there stuff that you would study maybe so that you could see how to counteract something? Because it'd be arguing against something that we don't believe. So it's fruitless.
And before you start there, Dave, there is a person. Ray Comfort believes in a crocoduck.
He's not an evolutionist.
Okay, I thought that'd get a laugh. Forget it. Dave, go ahead.
Well, I just threw that in as a typical example of a supposed. I believe that there is, instead of a evolutionary tree that Darwin put in his first book, that there really is a.
But that's not fair, Dave. You just said a supposed. Nobody supposes that on our side.
I don't care if you do or not. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. I'm just use that as an example.
Okay, no, I understand that, but could you use an example we actually believe? In other words, if I was trying to disprove Santa Claus, I would use things kids believe in, like there's no fat, fuzzy guy with a beard.
Okay.
If you argue there's no triceratops that had a hippo butt that ate plant, it doesn't matter because you're arguing against something that we're not positing that is a fact.
Okay, half bird, half reptile.
That's a good one.
Okay, and there is fossil evidences of reptile birds. We have those.
No, you don't.
Yeah. Well, let me the follow up on the other side there. Sean.
Yeah. There? Yeah. Again, can you please pull you have got a computer in front of you. You got a smartphone in your pocket that was intelligently designed. I admit. There are. Someone screamed out Archaeopteryx. There's a lot of evidence of the transition between dinosaurs and birds, between fish and You say no, there's not, and that's not very...
That'd be a good topic for a debate sometime.
Okay. Yeah, apparently we're not doing that tonight. There is evidence. There are transitional forms. There's transitional forms from fish to tetrapods.
There's no evidence.
Okay. Well,
That's a matter of opinion
argued.
right now.
Well argued.
I can prove it to you.
Yes. One last question, and then we'll go with closing comments. And for both sides, answers in Genesis is if you want to go find no transitional fossils, and talkorigins.org if you want to do find transitional fossils. See, I was pretty neutral on that, wasn't I? Your name, ma'am? Your name?
Deborah.
Hello, Deborah. What's your question?
Well, I went to Google like you told me to. Dr. Colin Patterson wrote a book for the British Museum of Natural History, and he was asked why his book did not include transitional fossils
He
or
already
pictures
said this.
thereof. I found it, as you said, go look for it. But
No.
here's my
I didn't
question.
say find someone else on Google that made the same argument. I said look for the evidence on Google Scholar,
From
where
a
you look up
doctor,
peer
from a
reviewed.
scientist who wrote a book.
There's a lot of
with
scientists that say a
knowledge.
lot of things that none of us agree with. Okay, well,
I
didn't.
did what you suggested,
let me-
is my point,
I'll-
but I have a question for Mark. Mark, as I understand scientists, they all agree that only life can create new life. So if you don't believe that Jehovah is the creator of origin of man, who do you believe? What life source do you believe did create life?
Just to
as
be
we
clear, not
know
all
it?
scientists believe that only life can create life. There's a whole field of scientists called in abiogenesis that work on non-life creating life.
Let me guess, they're atheist scientists.
You don't know about that. There's. You
and-
can be a Christian and be a scientist, an abiogenesis scientist as well.
In answer to your question, don't know, don't care. We have a theistic evolutionist and we have a non-theistic, well, they're both, we have a theistic evolutionist and and a young earth creationist here. Christians can believe or not believe in evolution, they can still be Christians. I think the point is moot. That's why I go straight for the jugular. There is no God, there is no Bible God. And Jesus was a false prophet, and I can prove that in public debate.
And that will be in another debate. And I think that one thing that might answer your question, Deborah, I've done a lot of research on this. When you're faced with a particular question, you go to an expert, a consensus of experts in any field that you want to go to. And if you're looking at abiogenesis, you go to the people that are trying to figure it out. But until then, there's no reason to insert a deity, because don't you think eventually they're going to figure it out? Scientists in another 50, 100, 1,000, doesn't matter. We are going to figure out how life began. And isn't that going to be absolutely wonderful? Wasn't that going to be wonderful? It will be wonderful. Just as all the other scientists have helped us along and our well-being by creating different things to make us better and live longer. Just 100 years ago, we had half of the, I'm being part of the panel now, I'm so sorry. 100 years ago, we had the lifespan of half of what we have now. What has changed in 100 years? Has God blessed us to live twice as long?
No, we realized how scientifically accurate Genesis was.
You get my meaning, that science is the work behind our longevity. Thank heavens, if there is a heaven, for scientists, because scientists are the ones that are proving that how our biology works. No reason to insert a deity for our longevity. It's all science. And with that, I think we're going to go with the closing statement. I'm sorry I added that in. Come back to me afterward. We have our little mini debate. Yes, closing statement, Chris?
No, I'm wondering, are we closing with everyone, or?
It's actually up to them. I think that the atheist has relinquished their time to question and answer period unless they want to add something. And I think that you have 13 minutes left, guys. If you want to go for it, you can. Other than that, we'll take another couple questions. What do you think?
In 13 minutes, I could give my talk.
On cell abiogenesis?
I could. However,
It's not my choice.
There wouldn't be anyone after to comment back, so it would kind of be.
I think you want to save it for another debate.
Okay, well, I can do that if you like.
If you're leaving it up to me, that's my choice.
Dave offered me all of the time for the closing comments. Okay, I'd like to just field questions. If you all want to hear the talk, I'll go with that. Okay. All right. I have to pick.
I'm
I've
glad
got
this
three
is a
different talks here.
democratic
Can you
debate.
pull it up here?
Look up sometime how long the Greeks lived, and you'll find out it's not monotonic, the increase. They lived longer than we did.
That's the red wine. That's the red wine.
Sure, I don't mind if Sean rebuts for a minute. That sounds.
Yeah, it's a fascinating discussion.
Yeah. Oh, we're in something called debates. It's the full discussion.
It's all yours, Don.
I'll keep it quick.
Could I interject while they're getting this set up? For the good of you that don't have Superman telephoto vision, my shirt says "God loves you," and the small print is "like a wife beating drunk loves his wife."
And if anyone cares, my shirt says gravity. It's not just a good idea, it's the law.
My shirt's just empty space, I guess.
Do you sell that space for advertising?
Yes, yes.
Cool.
I think it's more like an advertisement for black matter, for dark matter.
Yes. I'm stealing the light from your shirt.
Anybody have any other last minute questions while we're having our...
Hey, yeah, I'll field any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Chris, can you get this, the blonde and the brown shirt, sweater, whatever. Love questions from the audience, guys. This is your turn to make this debate go into a different direction.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I had talked to, I know Mark, and I forget your first name, Kent, a little bit in the parking lot, after the last debate, enjoyed that. I just had and I did look up, you had asked me, I didn't look up your site, but also the verse that you mentioned, and I know you want to talk about that more at a future debate, but just had a couple thoughts and then a question. First of all, Genesis 1 and 2, I don't really I missed part of the first part of this talk, so I'm not going to try to sequence. I don't really fully understand what you mean, but to me, I see a very gracious God setting up a perfect utopia for mankind out of his love, creating everything they need, and God, man showing his sinful nature. So I guess one question I have to ask is, do you believe in sin and man having a sin nature? Because I see God giving all things freely for man to enjoy, but then, don't answer just yet, but that's just one of my questions, is kind of curious what you think about that, because I see the, intelligent design of God creating all this for man, setting up the animals, the light, plants, everything, just telling them one thing not to do, which was not in their best interest, and, as I understand, because of their sin nature, they disobeyed that, and that was their choice. But then you're saying God cannot exist, but you have no proof of that. And I'm thinking of Hamlet, where he says, "Methink thou dost protest too much," that actually Josh McDowell and many others who have set out to disprove Christianity, and Josh McDowell had a lot of anger toward God. He in particular, had someone sexually molest him when he was growing up, and had a lot of, had an alcoholic father, had just a lot of issues with his family. And he set out to prove the Bible was not true, Christ couldn't be who he said he was, God couldn't exist. And he has more recently in his life admitted that his intellectual problems were not really intellectual problems, they were more emotional problems that they had just entertaining the thought of there being a God, because they were blaming things on God that were really, other choices of other people that had done in his life. So, and I just wanted to mention too, on Matthew 24:34, you had talked about your beliefs. It seems like you're having an incorrect interpretation when I look at that verse, because when you read the whole chapter of, and that can be for another debate, but chapter, okay. Well, one is about the concept of sin, and the other is You know, I'm just curious if there was something that happened in your life journey, especially Mark, maybe I'm addressing, that has caused you to have so much anger, and other people have noticed this too, at a person, you know,
We have to wrap it up here.
who you say doesn't exist. Because I wouldn't be angry at someone that I really didn't believe existed either.
Okay, as far as do I believe in sin? Definition of sin is missing the mark. I showed in my presentation where Bible God missed the mark and made a mistake, and he admitted to the mistake. So your Bible God himself admits to being a sinner. Why are you guys worshiping a sinner? Second point, you're saying that God set up the world for man because he loves us so much? No, Adam and Eve were set up. They didn't have a chance in the Garden of Eden. On top of everything else, God gave them contradictory commands. Eat of every tree, don't eat of every tree. They were 1 week old mentally. How could they tell those apart? Third thing, the slander that bad toilet training causes atheists, I'm translating here, that's slander. I don't think you should attack the person and use that to try to defeat their arguments. I don't go and attack Christians. I attack Christian doctrine. Christians are some of the smartest people I know. You have to be extremely smart to justify the crap that's in the Bible. You do. There aren't that many ignorant Christians. What there are deceived Christians, Christians that need to study more, Christians that need to think it through more. I don't hate Christians. I hate the doctrine. Just like you don't hate the sinner, you hate the sin. And as far as anger issues, I'm angry at what Christianity does to people, just like I'm sure you're angry at cancer. There's nothing wrong with being angry at things that harm us. I do believe that Christianity causes more harm than good in society.
And to follow up on that, ma'am, if you want to go to a website that shows, why I can't hear you, but
I'm sorry, I missed one part. Matthew 24:34. You say I maybe got it wrong. On my website, JC Not For Me, I go through 52 different translations, 16 Bible commentaries, about 30 lexicons, about a dozen commentaries, all on that one verse. It's all printed out. Everything's documented, page numbers and everything. Look it up this time.
And the follow-up there is that what Mark said, I also do not like the behavior of Christians following their doctrine. And if you want to look up the reason why, what'stheharm.net, because obviously Christians will say, well, what's the harm of believing? Well, believing dictates behavior on both sides. So go to what'stheharm.net and look up why we do not like the behavior of believers, because they do things that cause real harm while thinking that they are doing the right thing from their deity.
Real quick, my dad is not an alcoholic. I wasn't raped or beaten. Just to repeat from my personal position, I've just never seen any evidence or good reason even to believe that there is a God. Certainly not particularly Yahweh or Zeus or Allah or anyone else. But that's just my.
Okay, so it's 9:17. We're going to end this at 9:30 and go for it, Don.
Oh, well, we're not. Go ahead, Don.
Am I still ending at 9:30?
Yeah, it's coming late. I'm sorry, sir. I have to call it. It's 9:30. It's when they're kicking us out at 9:30. So save your question for the next debate, or we can ask the panels afterward. Okay.
Go ahead, Don.
The Sumerian, somebody was asking about the Sumerian thing, and I was wanting to know what.
He just said no.
Go ahead.
You want to answer that real quick, Don?
Not just the generality of the Sumerian pun, but the particular Sumerian pun.
Oh, the Sumerian pun. I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and take it. The Sumerian word "ti" means arrow. It means side or rib, and it also means life. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. Adam named his wife T because she.
No, the Genesis 3 account. That pun. That was the question in view.
320 is. Which pun? I'm sorry, I must have missed it.
Genesis 3:1. Yes.
I don't.
The serpent was the craftiest of all the animals.
Oh, okay. That isn't a pun. That isn't a pun. That is polemic literature. You have to read the whole and the plow.
What particular meaning do you derive? That's what I was getting
What particular meaning do I derive from it?
Yes.
From the Sumerian?
Yes.
The Ptolemaic literature, just because a serpent speaks does not mean anyone believes in ancient Sumer and speaking serpents. It means that they're putting a voice in some object to try to teach a moral lesson. That's how Sumerian Ptolemaic literature is written.
So you're saying that Genesis 3 is false?
No, I'm not saying Genesis 3 is false or a fairy tale. I'm saying it's original Ptolemaic literature, which is something different. It's to teach something.
And I think that it'd be wise for you both to ask Don after the. You got your point in, okay?
All right.
Okay, Don.
I probably don't have time to do this actually, but I can give it a shot and see what we do. Wasn't expecting red herrings dragged across the path tonight, and I was surprised how much I like red herring, it turns out. Anyway, the Stanley Miller Harold Urey experiment is how basically abiogenesis got started. We've got a gas globe there with water, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and carbon monoxide in there, and we're arcing it and you can produce a lot of cool stuff. Oh, wrong button. The sludge there, it looks like tar, has a bunch of cool stuff in it, a bunch of amino acids and nucleotides there. The joke that the scientists always say is nothing ever crawls out of the jar. There's several reasons for this. One of them is that they don't run the experiment longer than a PhD thesis requires. But there are other things. If you put a living cell in there, a bacteria, with the arcs going, you will soon have more amino acids and no bacteria. This is a hostile environment to get anywhere past the building blocks. It also generates a lot of other stuff which will get in the way, some of it which will be toxic. If you happen to end up with snake venom before you get DNA polymerase or something, you're in deep trouble. Also, the presence of water inhibits any chains from forming. If you look at the two amino acids up at the top, there's two H's and an O circled. In order to hook those two together for the bottom picture, you have to take one water molecule out. This happens in a wet environment, so that's never going to happen. You essentially have to dry that thing out. In order to do it in a cell which has a wet interior, you need an enzyme that's designed to hook the two together, or else they won't connect. But when you can, you end up with a very cool set of Legos, like Lego Mindstorms. These amino acids do all kinds of absolutely fascinating things. Here's a group of Lego blocks stuck together. It's actually a CNC machine, a sequence of amino acids. There are actually 275 of them hooked together. What it does is crawls along DNA, splits the two strands apart, takes one half and copies RNA, polymerizes it, and sends it out, and the RNA will make other machines in the cell. That's a picture of the RNA polymerase doing that. Nucleotides, some more stuff you get out of the jar. You can hook them up with phosphates, which they don't usually put in the jar, probably because it's flammable and not so good around the sparks. Anyway, you can hook that together. Am I running out of time or something? Okay. We have the same problem. You have to pull a water molecule out so they won't hook together, but when you do hook them together, you get these DNA molecules, which are very, very cool. This is RNA polymerase crawling along a strand of DNA doing what it does, and we got that little thing that has the magenta arrow pointing at. It's another little machine that I'm not going to explain. Messenger RNA is one of the kinds of RNA that gets peeled off of it. All it is a piece of computer tape. It's got some code on it that was peeled off the DNA.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Don?
Sure.
Is this happening in the Miller experiment? This is happening?
No, this is not in the Miller experiment. This is what's in a cell. This is the stuff that can happen when you hook those things together. It does not.
So you're not insinuating that this
Miller
is abiogenesis?
was hoping to have
right?
Leninger come out of the jar, but in fact, this is not abiogenesis. I'm not talking about cells. What these building blocks will do in a cell. How cool it is. I get off on this, actually. To transfer RNA is a little machine that goes and grabs amino acids. It has a barcode on it at the bottom there, a three nucleotide barcode. It grabs them and brings them over to a ribosome, which is yet another CNC machine that every living cell has in it. And what it does, there's the whole thing. it takes the messenger RNA down there at the bottom, cranks it in, has a little conveyor belt that mechanically moves the thing through, grabs the transfer RNAs, compares their barcodes with the ones on the messenger RNA to see if they match, has error correction. If it makes a mess of it, kicks it out and gets rid of it. If it matches, it puts them through there. It gets it hit with a little hammer to get rid of the water molecule and sets out the string that's going out the top, which is a chain of amino acids. Okay, there it is going around its cycle there. So we have a chicken and egg problem here. We have one machine making another machine and vice versa. It's not a paradox because, of course, you only need one of the machines to make the other one. Then you don't make the first machine again, you make a second machine. But you have to ask the question, which one comes first? My money's on the RNA polymerase coming first. Okay, a bunch of different things you need. You also need DNA polymerase because, of course, if you don't duplicate the DNA, you'll never get to a second cell. So we have this list of things, and it turns out that when we get the second cell, the DNA has to, we not only need all these machines here to do the different jobs, we need to have the DNA also be coded for all those machines, or they won't ever be made in the other cell. Information does not get from the machines to the DNA. It's a one-way street. So everything that's there has to be coded redundantly. The machine has to be made, and the DNA has to also carry a code that it didn't get from the machine. Okay, DNA codes for it all. Here, lower left is computer-controlled, computer numerically controlled milling machine. On the right is a system for making computer parts. They're making parts for each other. It would be cool to have a machine that makes a copy of that machine, but the best we can do on this planet is pieces making parts for each other. It turns out the cell had the same problem, so they have lots of little machines in there that each make parts for the other. RNAP, which is of course RNA polymerase, alone has, I said, 275 amino acids from 825 base pairs of DNA, so we've got dual coding that's approximately the equivalent of 550 bytes of information. There is what that works out to in computer term. That would be half a kilobyte of code, and it's odd that it's so efficiently written that half a kilobyte of code actually makes a CNC machine. If you've ever written code, you can appreciate that, but it certainly does. So let's do some math here. I picked a book here, Dr. Seuss's Foot book, and I picked it because it's a nice short little book. It has 500 letters in it, actually 500 and change. I think it was 504 or something, and 130 words. Average is about 4 letters per word if you do the math there. If we had a generator that whipped through that book not whipped through the book, whipped out characters at the same frequency as during the book, we don't want to make it hard, we want to make it easy. We want 1 in 5 characters to be a space. We want E to be most common, T to be next most common, etc. in the old Edda Ein Sherdlu, or Edda Oin Sherdlu. It's hard to pronounce that, but that's the code cracker's sequence of letters. No lowercase, no Chinese, no Hebrew. Okay, we want to generate the book. The Stanley Miller held Urey jar has Hebrew and Chinese mixed in there too. It isn't just the good amino acids. We got lots of trash in there that's going to mess everything up. Okay, even starting with a perfect set of letters, we'd expect most of the words to be complete nonsense. There'd be for example, Edda Oin, E-T-A-O would be the first 4-letter word, perhaps, and doesn't mean anything. We would be lucky if we got 1 word in 10. I tried going through a bunch of random things, and it looked like I was getting slightly less than 1 in 10 that was actually an English word. 130 words, and 1 to 10 odds would be 1 chance in 10 to the 130th for the entire book containing valid words. Now, I'm not trying to build a CNC machine with this book. I'm just trying to get a book full of English words. Pretty simple test here, not trying to push it very far. The result will still be complete nonsense, but it'll be interesting. Now, could we do this with a Miller-Urey apparatus? We have a lot of stars after all. We'll assume perfect hand-selected alphabet or perfectly selected DNA things in there. Not DNA, amino acids and nucleotides. We'll assume that all the parts are present, that the spark won't break any of it, but it'll hook it together and it won't break up the chains once it makes them. We'll have a perfect system here. We have lots of stars, 10 to the 11th stars in the galaxy, 10 to the 12th galaxies. Due to Big Bang inflation, there may be 1 million times that many galaxies that we'll never see because they're sort of outside of our universe. So that adds up to 10 to the, or multiplies up to 10 to the 28th total stars available to us. We have lots of time. I'm not going to go the 13.7 billion years back to the beginning. I'll go the 10 to the 14th years till the last star burns out, because it doesn't matter whether we became life now or whether it happened 100 billion years from now. It's all the same to life. It takes 20 minutes for an E. coli bacterium to divide naturally. Let's generate a bacterium 1,000 times a second. Instead of doing it the slow way, we'll do it in a millisecond. So it makes, you can hear the tone with all these things being thrown together. So we can accomplish 3 times 10 to the 24th serial experiments. We have lots of space on the planet. I'm going to say that the whole planet Earth, which we will have, assume there's one at the right distance around every single star in every universe, is one Miller apparatus, a huge 8,000 mile diameter Stanley Miller Harold Urey apparatus. And it's arcing all the way through, and we're producing, we can of course cram a lot of experiments in there. We'll assume we need the space for a bacterium each place we're going to do the experiments. So that's about a micron across. So that's 10 to the 18th experiments per cubic meter. So we got a lot of them running simultaneously, and we run all the numbers together, and we have 10 to the 90th total experiments in the whole universe in all time if we're doing it as fast as we possibly can, overextending our resources. We still need 10 to the 130th power just to do a nonsense version of Dr. Seuss. That isn't 45% more, that's that huge number down there at the bottom of the screen, times as much time or as much space or as many stars or whatever.
At
So we
about
have
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. We don't want a senseless book. We don't even want one working enzyme and its DNA. What we need is a completely working machine, and we need a machine which can build a working copy of itself. Now, we can easily see how the blue arrows work. That's a complicated machine there. We haven't done one on Earth yet, but it could conceivably build a copy of itself, which could build a copy of itself, etc. We understand how we get the part shelf down there at the bottom. The question is, how do we get all of those parts to drop off the shelf and become the first robot, since we don't have any mechanics? And until we get that mechanics, evolution isn't going to help us, because we don't have a self-replicating system. So we have to do this without evolution. It has to happen by chance. I'm skeptical that this is possible. And my question to the believers is, what process did it?
I revert back to my other statement. We'll find out eventually.
Yes.
But don't you think we'll find out, Don?
I believe so.
Okay. So we have a little problem here. We don't have enough money to pay for tonight's dinner. Did everybody pay for tonight's dinner? We had 45 dinners, and we're short about $200. Yeah. Well, it's 45 times 22, blah, blah, blah. Some people paid on Visa. Oh, whoa, wait a second. That's not for me. That's for the other guy. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's $100 right there. Actually, you got to do that with Frank, because you're going to have to sign for it. So Frank is Frank is the bold, is the waiter. So we're going to, Dave and I have decided that if there's any overage that we haven't worked out, that we're just going to split it. But if you feel kind enough, the difference for the whole $200.
I did not buy dinner tonight.
Okay, I didn't think so. Right. For the whole thing? No, Don. I can't expect you for that. No, I can't accept that. You know, but what I can accept is your spare change. So throw the spare change on the table over here. If you feel like tonight's worthwhile, Dave and I are going to have to cough up the rest. I don't know. Everybody I trust paid, but something like that, yeah. So how'd you like it, guys? What'd you think? Was it good? Was it good? I think that we went through a lot. I think that one of the truths is that you, if you're looking for truth, is you negate all of your beliefs on both sides. and look for the evidence on both sides equally, and then decide what's the truth, no matter what comes out the other end, should be what you believe. So I want to thank Dave for offering the sound system. I want to thank Jeff for operating the camera. I want to thank Chris for dragging the microphone all around. And I hope you see our next debate, December 17th. Does prayer work? No, but if you put your email on that, or if you're part of Dave's organization, Dave sends out a flyer. We put out a meetup group. So backyardskeptics.com will give you a thank you. We'll give you a thank you very much, by the way. And anything else is great. That's great. That's going to help big time. Thank you, everybody. And all I'll need is a couple hands. I think Jeff and Chris and Sean is going to help me. Thank you, Barry.
So, of course, stop. Yes, that's correct. We need to make sure, obviously, you get all your cords back that are yours, and they get theirs.